Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. My name is Lasma and today we will be making, as promised, a jersey t-shirt using just a sewing machine. So the first thing that I have done is I have laid the fabric down. Before that I have pressed it with my iron and it was steamed, and now I have put on the pattern. So you need to put where the center of the pattern is, next to the edge of the fabric. And I have folded it like this so to not waste any material, so to be more efficient. And first I will do the bodice part. I will trace it and cut it out, and afterwards I will do the sleeves. So let's go. So we need to pin down the pattern to the fabric so it doesn't move. As jersey fabric is very elastic, you might actually require some weight on the pattern to keep it there. And don't have any excess fabric lying on the floor or just hanging over the table, because it will pull it down and will distort the fabric. Another thing is, see if your salvage edge does something to the fabric, like pulls it together, because sometimes the fabric is very stretchy and the edge just distorts it. So if this happens, it's better actually to cut the edge off before you cut out the pattern. For me, it doesn't seem to change anything for the way that the fabric lies, so I will just leave it there for the time being. I'm using this fabric pen that will fade away with time. You can also use either soap if it's a darker fabric, or chalk, or these special pens that under heat they vanish or vanish in water. But it's great to use something that doesn't pull the fabric too much, that it's easy to draw on it. So I found this quite handy. When you're doing the front part, don't forget to make the mark in the armhole area, because you will have the same mark on your sleeves and you will need to match these two marks when you're sewing. And after you have traced the bodice parts, we need to add the seam allowances. I will add 2 centimeters for the hemline, and the rest of the seams will have 1 centimeter. And for the neckline, I will not add anything, because when I was doing the pattern, I was making it in my last video, I actually added extra centimeters, so I don't want to make the neck too narrow. So I'll just leave it like this and will not add anything extra. But the rest of the seams will have extra 1 centimeter, except for the hemline, and for the sleeves as well, we will make 2 centimeters for the hemline. I was actually too slow for my pen. It already disappeared, so I'm gonna use chalk. So beware that this actually can happen. Usually they do stay longer and I quite like using them. But this time around, I think I'm running out of them and the ink is already disappearing. But otherwise, when they're fresh and new, they work perfectly. So for the time being, I will use chalk. And before I cut out, I will pin the original trace, because I will need to transfer it to the other side. If you have your pattern already with the seam allowances, you don't need to do that. You will not need to transfer anything, just cut it out and sew according to your seam allowance. However, I really like seeing these lines, and that helps me be more precise. It definitely is more time consuming. However, if you're really not that secure about all this sewing and you just like to see your lines, I definitely recommend you just invest a little bit more time to transfer the lines and to have everything on your pattern, especially if you're doing it for the first time. So this time I will be copying the pattern to the other side. So throughout sewing I can see it. And definitely add pins to the places where you have the corners, edges, and add more curves and add more pins where the curve is, so you can copy it more precisely. And don't forget about the marks in the armholes at the front of your bodice, just like I did. And now it's time for the sleeves. I actually did not have enough fabric from the first piece that I used for the bodice, the one that was in between the front and the back. But I will use that for the neckband, so that will not definitely be wasted. So I just take another piece and we'll cut out the sleeves from this piece. And you don't need to place it at the fold, but you do need to have it double. And so again, put some weight on it, pin it down and trace it. Now add the seam allowance, again 1 centimeter around the seams and 2 centimeters at the bottom of the sleeve. Now the same thing, that you need to pin the trace and all the marks, like the center and the hash mark. So you can transfer it to the other side. Again, pay attention to the corners and that the fabric is straight. And use more pins for the curves. So the sleeve is ready, it's traced, and the last thing that we need to do before we get to the fun part, the sewing, is we need to make the neckband. So now we're going to make the neckband, and to know the length of it, you need to measure it either on your pattern, if you're making it from a different pattern, or you can measure it from your t-shirt if you did it like I did in my previous video and copy the pattern from your t-shirt. So you need to measure the neckline all around it, and to get the length of the neckband you need to multiply it by 0.8 because it has to be a little bit smaller than the neckline itself. So for this t-shirt, the neckline length was 55 centimeters, and multiplying by 0.8, it will be 44 centimeters. And the width of the neckband is also as your t-shirt has it. So for this t-shirt, I will have the width, 1.5 centimeters. And to get the total width of the fabric strip that you need to double it. So 1.5 times 2 plus the seam allowances on both sides. And the seam allowance is 1 centimeter, so altogether it will be 5 centimeters. So I'll need to cut out a strip of fabric that will be measuring 44 by 5 centimeters. And you don't cut it on the cross grain, the straight grain. You need to cut it on the cross grain. So it will not go like this or like this, but you need to cut it like diagonally, the cross grain. So measure out closer to the edge. All right. Again on the left side. Make sure it doesn't move. And we can take our handy weights. These actually are so old. They're from my grandma. She was sewing for decades now. Unfortunately, she's not doing that anymore, but she gave me these. It's still from Soviet times. It comes in really handy. So 44. You can add a centimeter for this seam allowance as well. So I'll make mine 45. It's not really that important because it's stretchy anyway. So even if you lose like 1 centimeter, it's not going to be a big deal. But let's be precise. So it's 45 then by 4 by 5. So this is done. So you see, it stretches a little bit differently than when you cut it on cross grain. So this is very important. All right, so we have everything cut out. And we can start sewing. So a few words on sewing with jersey fabrics before we start. They are elastic. That means that you cannot use a straight stitch. It will break when you wear the t-shirt or whatever else you're making. So you need to use a different kind of stitch. The most common one, and probably the one that you have on your sewing machine, is a zigzag. So you can absolutely use that one for jersey fabrics. You might have a different one on your sewing machine. Explore it. You might have a 3-step zigzag or an overcast stitch. They're different, available on different sewing machines, so just take a look. But I'll be using a zigzag stitch. I'll just make it more narrow. If you can change the length of your stitch and the width of your stitch, then you can do that as well. And I have my zigzag currently, the width is 3 millimeters. I will make it 1. And I have my length on 1.5, I'll make it 2. And another thing is needles. You cannot use a needle that has a sharp tip because it will cut your fabric and will make holes in it. So you need a special kind of needle that is called a stretch needle. So these needles, they have a more rounded tip that just slides through the fabric without breaking it. You actually might have a universal stitch, which is also suitable for your jersey fabric, and you definitely need to try before you sew if it makes holes or if it doesn't. If it's great and you like the way it looks and nothing is breaking, so you can go on and use that one. But if you see that there are these little tiny holes where you're stitching your fabric, then definitely get a jersey needle, stretch needle. And another thing also is the tension. Usually my tension here on this Bernina sewing machine is 4, but I will make it 2 because you don't want it to be pushed down by this presser foot. So less pressure is better for jersey fabrics. And when you're sewing, make sure that it has this flow to it, if I can say so. So you're not pulling it, you're not stretching it, because it will just deform the stitches and will not look good. You will not get a straight stitch. So you need to be just really gentle and guide it gently. So let it go, let it slide and let it have its natural flow. And so we're good. And now we can start sewing our t-shirt. So take the front and the back part with the right sides facing and pin together the shoulder seams. So if you place your pins like this rather than like this, you can actually sew over them, which is really convenient. So just place it like this, all the way. And that is definitely a very big bonus when you sew with a sewing machine, that you can use these pins and don't worry about your serger breaking them off, because you cannot do like this with a serger or you will ruin your blades and your pins as well. So that is one good thing, that you can sew over these pins without any worry. And before we start sewing, I will show you the elastic tape. It's quite clear and transparent one. I will use this to stabilize the shoulder seam. You probably have noticed that t-shirts that you buy in a store, they all have this. Well, not maybe everyone, but most of the t-shirts have this elastic tape in it, so this the seam stays nice and flat and doesn't wobble. And you need to put it on the back side of your t-shirt as you sew. No need to pin it, just hold it in place as you're sewing. Start from the very edge of the fabric, not where your line starts, but where the edge of your t-shirt starts. And now when we have done the shoulder seam, we can insert the sleeves. So again, check for your hash marks, which is the front, which is the back. And you need to line the marks on your bodice with the marks on your sleeve. And the center of your sleeve with the center of the seam, like this. And pin your seam backwards so the elastic tape is covered. So we have done the shoulder seams and the armhole seam. And next what I will do, I will press down the seam allowance so we can sew the side seams, and it will be both for the sleeve and the hemline of the bottom t-shirt. So when that is done, we need to pin together the sides of the sleeves and the side of the bodice. And to make sure that these seams align, just take the pin and go through one side to the other, straight into the seam, so that when you sew, they don't move. And just pin it. So now we have sewn the side seams, and next we're going to do the hems. But before we do that, to make the hem straight and nice and give a clean and crisp finish, I will use a tape like this. It is, if you can see this. It is elastic, and you glue it on the hem and it just sticks it together. And then we can sew it nicely, because otherwise you get this wobbly hem and it doesn't look pretty. So I do suggest that you use something like this. You can use interfacing, or you can use the wash away tape. It's also great. I don't have it, so I'm using this. But anything to stabilize the seam, not exactly like this that we use for the shoulders, but something a bit lighter would be great, an option. And I'm going to use it both for the this hem and for the sleeves. And we're going to use another thing called the twin needle. It is optional. You can stick to your zigzag if you want to, if you don't have this. But if you have a chance to get this twin needle, it's actually a great thing, because it looks like a flat block seam from the right side. On the left side, however, it looks more like a zigzag. But this is a really beautiful finish for your homemade garments if you don't own a flat block seam. And I will show you how to use it and how it looks afterwards when using this twin needle. But first, let's glue the hems. I have glued the hems now. So you see, it looks really nice and very stable, but still they're elastic. You need an interfacing or a tape that will still be elastic after you glued it on, otherwise it will not be comfortable to put on the shirt. And now we need to do the hems, and this is the part where we take our twin needle, if you had one. If you don't, continue with the zigzag. But I will show you how I use the needle. I take out the regular, the jersey needle that I have, and put this one the same way. And the thread that I already have here, I will thread it through one of the needles. Okay, and now I take another thread. I have this lace where I can put it. If you don't have such a place for another thread, you can just place it on the table. It will not change anything. And then I thread the other thread the same way as the first one. And I put it in the other needle. So I have threads in both of the needles. Okay, so they're both in. So before you actually sew, if you've never done that before, definitely try it out, how it goes. And now let's start with the hemline. With this seam, you can either open it up and then sew on top of it, or just close it to the back side. If you're doing that, just pin into place, so it's easier. I have the t-shirt inside out, and I start just shortly before the seam, before the side seam. So my seam allowance for the hemline was 2 centimeters, and I place my t-shirt also so I can sew 2 centimeters from the edge. And don't forget to go back to the straight stitch, because you cannot sew zigzag with the twin needle. So return back to the straight stitch, and you can actually make it longer. The length of your stitch can be even 4 centimeters. Right, let's go. And now that we have sewn the hemline, let's do the same thing for the sleeves. Also turn them inside out. You can pin the seam the same way or open it up. I'll do it like this. And place it so you will be sewing on the right side. Now we have done our hemlines, and it's time for the neckline. Take the neckband that you prepared, fold it right sides facing, put it in place, and before you go on, remove your twin needle, because we won't need it anymore. And let's put in the jersey needle, and let's go back to our zigzag stitch. So now when that is done, open it up and fold it right sides facing. And we need to press it. So I have pressed it, and what we do now is we take our t-shirt, we fold it in half to find the middle point of the back, and place a pin. And the same thing for the front. All right, and now we need to add the neckband. You need to have the raw edges up, and place where you have the seam. Put it here where you put your pin on the back, so all the edges are aligned. Okay, and pin them together, so like this. And then you flip it over And also find the middle part of your neckband and pin again to the right side of your t-shirt, to the middle part. So middle part of the neckband pinned to the middle of your front bodice. All the edges are up and the neckband is on the right side of the t-shirt, and also itself is on the right side. All right, and now we need to equally distribute the neckband. So I'm gonna stretch it, hold it, place a pin. Be careful that the edges match. Again, stretch it, hold it, and place a pin. And pay attention to the shoulder seam. We need to close the elastic tape that we put in there. So always fold your seam to the back, your shoulder seam. And you can put in as many pins as you need. The more the better, actually, then your neckband will be more equally distributed. So let's go to the other side. Again, you need to stretch it quite a bit. So now it's all pinned in place. And we can sew it with the same zigzag stitch. Start from either the seam or the back. And as I have the seam allowance 1 centimeter, I'll sew 1 centimeter from the edge. And pay attention to the shoulder seams. Press them down when you sew over them. So the t-shirt is ready. But there is one last thing that I want to do, and I will show you. It is optional. You definitely can skip this step, but I think it just adds that little bit to the t-shirt. So you see this part, the seam is quite exposed, and if you look at the t-shirts that you own, you probably will see that there's this little strip of fabric that is sewn on top of it to close the seam. And this is what I want to do. I have this little piece of fabric. You can use a different color or the same color that you used for your t-shirt, and measure out from one seam to the other the length of it, and the width about 3 centimeters. Can be a little bit more, a little bit less, depending on your fabric. And what you do is you place your strip of fabric right side down, fold the edge a little bit inwards, place it there at the seam, but just to cover it a little bit, and pin it. Now go all around this back part, but the seam definitely has to be invisible at this point. So, but not too much, because if you leave a lot of fabric on top of the seam, it will just become bulky. You want to cover it without making it too bulky. So at this point it looks like this. We have pinned the right side to the neckband, and then you switch it around to the right side of the shirt. Go back to your straight stitch for this little piece, we're gonna use a straight stitch. It will not break or any other bad thing will happen to it, because it's such a small amount of fabric, then it will be fine. So place your t-shirt down and place your needle right in the seam. You can open it up just a little bit. So go in between the neckband and the bodice part. Be sure not to sew anything else to it. And open it up just a little bit. So you start where your strip, this extra strip that we added, where that starts. So open it up a bit, secure it, and keep on sewing right on the seam. So right between, just open it up a little bit so you can get straight in there. So this strip is now sewn to the t-shirt. Let's remove the pins, and now you can fold it down to close the seam. And we need to also fold the edge that it goes under this fabric strip, about 1 centimeter in width. So this is how it looks now. It's all pinned in place. Check on the other side that all the fabric is smooth. Like for example here, it's not smooth, so I need to remove it and repin it, because we're gonna sew on top of this fabric, and this seam will be very visible. All right, and then it's time to sew it, and sew about 1 millimeter from the edge of this fabric. So I can move the needle of my sewing machine, so just press it one time and it will go 1 millimeter to the right. If you don't have that, then just manually try to get it. The main thing is that you catch it, but not too much of it. You'll be sewing just about on the edge of your fabric. We have done it. We have finished that t-shirt, and I hope you liked it. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial, and the main thing, I hope you understood that you can sew jersey with a sewing machine. You don't need to own a serger. It's absolutely possible to sew your t-shirts, your leggings, pajamas on your sewing machine. But I do want to say that owning a serger saves you quite a lot of time, because although this wasn't difficult, I could definitely do everything with my sewing machine. It is so much quicker to do it on a serger. So if you really want to sew a jersey more, I do recommend looking into getting a serger of your own. But meanwhile, I hope you really enjoy the process, enjoy this video, and don't forget to give it a thumbs up if you liked it. Consider subscribing to my channel, and I really hope to see you in another video. Goodbye!